I'm Rachel Routman, and I'm here with my beloved colleague, Kathy Champeau, and we want to welcome you to the last of four conversations that we've had in a series called Comforting Voices in Uncertain Times. And in case you missed any of the first three, you can find them on my website, reggieroutman.org. The first one, just to refresh your memory, was A Contagious, Bold Vision for Literacy Teaching. The second, Creating Joyful and Reader-Centered Classrooms. The third, Centering Children's Voices Through Writing. And today, Curriculum as Conversations. And we wanted to end with that because it will tie everything together for you, because it's really about, in a democratic society, right, Kathy, hearing all the voices and how to include students' voices in particular as probably more important than the teachers' voices. I know when I started teaching, I was very comfortable because I didn't know that much, following the teacher's manual and doing most of the talking. I don't remember encouraging kids to talk, and wow, that has totally, that's one of your big areas.
Well, one of the things, how I like to think about it is what do we think we're doing and what do kids think they're doing? And in order for us to engage students in literacy, we have to know what they're thinking. And I like to think about it as uncorking bottles of fine wine because you have to let them breathe. And uh, and with that, all kinds of, and I know this might sound maybe superfluous, but it's not. It's magical because kids are young intellectuals and there's so much to say. And that's the only way that we can really understand how and what and why they're thinking the way they do, and then how we can help them learn and grow more by helping them think together through conversation.
And that all starts with a trusting culture where kids feel that they're safe, physically, academically, emotionally, so that they can really speak their minds, which is absolutely necessary for us to maintain our democracy. Um, and so let's talk about how looking at our own teaching practices and some of the things that we have done and learned where we really do get to hear all the voices and how that happens. For me, when I was doing my residency work over the past 3 decades or so, and I'd go into schools, and I was brought into schools to help teach reading and writing, although they never said what the reason they brought me in really was to raise the test scores, right? And follow the manual religiously. And what one of the things that I was sort of shocked by was that social studies and science and just real world issues were going by the wayside because there wasn't any time for that. And so I then grounded all of my teaching of reading and writing in nonfiction, real world, authentic reading and writing. And that made all the difference because kids become then, so engaged and so excited about, local issues, what the power they have to change things, even in their own classroom. And so we started off, all of the books that I brought in were related to the study that was going on, which was connected to standards. But we took the big topics, and these were local and they were national, whether it was environmental, whether it was how do we improve homelessness in the community, how do we make school a safer place, how do we get them to change the menu in the cafeteria? It could be something as simple as that. And once the kids got engaged and we did a lot of that work, the first things that we wrote together. We read together. They weren't just, here's the book, read it, right? And I know, yeah, go ahead.
Well, all of those things are really powerful because what is happening is you're helping children know that they have agency and they can impact their world and they can together investigate issues. One of the ways we got started in the classrooms that I was working with was actually thinking about, and you mentioned this in the beginning of this in our conversation today, that building this peaceful, caring classroom is critical. And we did that through having large conversations around thought-provoking books.
Yeah.
And by having those conversations where they would sit in a circle, so they're not looking at the backs of each other's heads, they could unpack their thinking around, particularly one of the books that I write about is The Invisible Boy. But through those conversations, not only did they learn how to have productive conversations together, because they don't just happen, that needs to be taught. But they also learned the moves for being kind and caring, which led, in one particular instance, children developing a video for the whole school showing and teaching the children in the school how to be kind and caring on the playground, how to be kind and build friendships even on the bus. So that those conversations really have multiple benefits when a teacher understands the complexity of what they're doing, but it's not hard. I say complex, but by that I don't mean it's hard. It's actually quite easy.
Well, it's easy if we show them the way. This is really important. I talked a lot in all of the work that I've done, what I call the optimal learning model, where you start with demonstration. Here's what it looks like. Then shared experience. We're going to do it together before you're going to be off on your own. And so you and I think, wound up doing the same kind of thing. I can picture being in a fourth grade classroom where their voices were not raised. It was the teacher doing most of the talking and modeling for the teacher, but really mostly for the students so they could take over. It was kind of like a concentric circle. I chose, let's say there were 25 kids in the class or 24 kids. So we would have six groups of, I'm looking ahead, of four that I expected to be doing a self-sustaining conversation, but not until it was modeled. So all of the students, except for those six leaders that I thought would make good facilitators, because you want them to be successful. And those six leaders were the ones that were part of the inner circle. And then the rest of the kids were sitting around the circle and they had to be noticers. You and I have talked about that. And they had to be, they couldn't get away, they couldn't get off by just listening. I had them write down, what do you notice with no criticism? What are you observing the facilitator doing, me at that time, having the inner circle particularly look at that. And for the kids that on the outer circle, writing down, that was my evaluation, what they saw the rest of the people doing. Then when we had done that a couple of times, Kathy, and I know you and I have very similar philosophy, and they understood the power of this too, then I could have six, as many as six or seven, depending on how many kids were in the classroom, self-sustaining groups where the facilitator was doing what I did, and basically promoting talk, where every child there had talk. And what worked out so well when teachers were observing, they couldn't believe it. I was completely free then to walk around and intervene as necessary, prompt as necessary, because that evaluation piece has to be part of it. But the kids, to your point, they loved being in charge of their own conversations. And then learning that language, and you're so good at that in terms of if a student's not speaking, how you bring them into the conversation, right?
Well, there's several things there are several things going on in what you were just describing, Regi, that I think is really important to highlight. And that is you were engaged in real assessment. You were engaged on so many levels as a teacher, but also the children are doing a self-assessment of what they were seeing.
Mhm.
And it's like you're looking at the classroom and looking at these conversations with an outsider's eye, but an insider's knowledge because you know the children. And you're helping the children do the same thing because with that self-assessment, they then can start figuring out, and when they go off into their smaller conversations that they're having on their own, they're using that same set of criteria that they were noticing in the large group. One thing that we did as a twist to that is we would create anchor charts.
I was just going to say that. We did the same thing. Yeah.
Productive moves. And we what we did was we went to an art store. So the teachers and I went to an art store because they had this cork board, which is a more rigid board than just a poster board that can stand up and can be propped up. So as we built those charts together about the behaviors and we take pictures and show it in action with a simple word or phrase of what to do, when they had their own conversation, they could actually go and take that and set it next to them so that that would be a reminder to them of what a productive conversation looks like and how they can facilitate that together.
We did a similar thing that's brilliant. We did a similar thing with creating a chart of the language that you can use if you're the facilitator or participant. So, for instance, Lauren, I haven't heard from you. Our group hasn't heard from you. What would you like to add to this conversation? Giving them the language to bring kids into the conversation. Does anybody want to build on what Robin said? Um, that helped a lot. And then having those almost like crib sheets, everybody got a copy of. Here's how you can language that you can use as a participant, but also as a facilitator to be sure that everybody is getting a chance to talk. It's really important.
I think I've mentioned this in some of our past conversations. When I go into a classroom to help work with alongside the teachers and children, I always have my eye out for those children that are in and out of the classroom because they need special support. And I often thought about how does that feel coming into a classroom, this well-oiled machine, you're sitting down and oftentimes they would come in as these productive conversations were either beginning or they're in the middle of. And I thought, well, how does that make them feel? And so I would watch them. And this one time, this is how transformative this is. So this one time I saw this little girl come in, she sat down. She knew the story and she was listening to the conversation of her friends. And I could tell she had something to say, but everybody else was so busy talking and having these great conversations, nobody noticed that she was trying to find her way into the conversation but could not. So I stopped the group and I said, does anybody notice what Elena was doing? And Claire said, yes, I did. She was trying to say something. So I said to Claire, well, what do you think you should do about that? And she said, invite her into the conversation. So I said, okay, Claire, do that. And she did. Then Elena had some profound comment about what was happening that sparked this great conversation. But it didn't end there. At the end, I asked the group, I said, what would have happened if Claire hadn't invited Elena into the conversation? And they all said, we wouldn't have had these grand ideas and we wouldn't have had the same kind of thinking. Elena was changed from that day forward. She was not the shy rather child that was hesitant to say anything. She became an equal member of that classroom. It happened in that one moment.
It's transformative. And they're not, I think a lot of the kids that we were working with, most of my work was in high poverty schools. A lot of the kids didn't have agency in their lives. Some of them were homeless. So the classroom has to be a sanctuary. And when kids learn that they can have agency in their lives, that changes everything for them. I think that's the whole, in our still democracy that we have right now is that the kids that we are teaching are going to be able to use their voices in a way that is productive, not just for them, but for their community and going outward with that. Um, I want to talk a little bit more about the shared experiences, Kathy, because this is, I think, where the, curriculum becomes conversation and that we're looking to make the work that we're doing as authentic as possible, that they're not just completing a worksheet or doing something that's mandated, but that whatever we're doing, we're connecting it to their lives. And that has made all the difference. I want to tell a story about and you can do this even with kindergarten students. Uh,
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
Kindergarten students are remarkable, actually. in terms of what they are capable of doing. And they don't know what they can't do yet, which is a joy. They haven't had teachers who've had low expectations for them. They come in and they're mostly full of joy and eager to learn. And of course, reading and writing and reading aloud to them and noticing stories and writing class stories together becomes really the main curriculum, I think, in kindergarten. But the story I want to tell is I was working in a high needs school in Oregon, and there was no all-day kindergarten. It was a two, so the kindergarten teacher had like 50 students, 25 in the morning and 25 in the afternoon. Even so, what we were able to do in terms of reading and writing was transformative. So that I'll give you the ending part first. So at the end of kindergarten, almost all of the kids, even though she only had them a half day, were readers and writers, which was stunning. So this was a real gift to the first grade teachers, right? And the way we did that was to a lot of shared reading and shared writing, and both of us have written about that. That is where the teacher initially is in charge and is in terms of who's doing the writing, it's the teacher. The teacher's holding the pen, but the kids are contributing the story. And what we wrote about was I was looking for something very authentic for them to do, so that the writing would not just be an exercise or word work or phonics in isolation. And so we settled on doing a restaurant review to a local restaurant of Red Robin, which had hamburgers. And even though this was low socioeconomic community, everybody had been to Red Robin, and they all loved it. So we wrote a review and we did that together. What do we want to call it? And so I charted their words as they said them. Um, but what happened eventually, we got this wonderful two reviews, one from the AM class, one from the PM class. And the classroom teacher took them to the local Red Robin. And the manager was so thrilled with the review that she posted them in the restaurant. So imagine what it was like for these kids when they went back to the restaurant and they see the reviews right there. But we took it much further than that in the sense that the learning, a lot of the phonics learning it was explicit, but it was incidental. It wasn't like today we're going to learn the sound or oh, we're going to do this particular blend. So all of the word work that we did emanated from the review that they had. And then again, the evaluation piece was really important. They all had whiteboards. So write the word, red, uh, and take a look at it. What's the tricky part? What's the vowel in the middle? All right, write it. And then meanwhile, I would cover the chart with the word red. Then they would check themselves. So even in kindergarten, did you get it right? And then you can see as a teacher right away who has it, who doesn't have it, right? It's a very easy way to
Very easy way. Two things. I just want to go back to your restaurant example. And I want to ask you, maybe you don't remember, what was the reaction of the parents? Do you remember?
They were thrilled. They were absolutely thrilled because they could see the impact of what was happening in kindergarten in their kids' class. Mommy, Daddy, look what we wrote. And then reading it. See, that was the thing as well. Every child it wasn't that long, but they all got the three sentences. They practiced reading it. They read it with a partner. They wrote some of the work, everything just exploded from that point.
And
And it
also,
wasn't
what
hard.
was the
Just
reaction?
fun.
This is kindergarten. So
Kindergarten.
often people think that young children are not capable of that kind of thinking and that kind of doing in that agency. Do you remember what the reaction was in that school when they saw what these kindergartners have done? Because I think that's really critical.
Think they were surprised, but and the kindergarten kids were all celebrated. And it was that whole thing, I think you want learning to end in some kind of celebration, like, wow, look what we did and look what we've learned. And the phonics part, the word work part was just part of what we did. And it was I don't want to say incidental, it was very explicit. And I think that's what people don't understand, that you don't have to teach it from a lockstep program because these kids were readers and writers. And Kathy, I know you want to say more, but this is a good place. I want to interject. Kathy and I deliberately have not focused on the science of reading what's going on with that. It's so political, it's so controversial. But I do want to give you two resources that are new, that are excellent. One is called What School Leaders Need to Know About the Science of Reading, a Guide for Principals. It's an ebook by Matt Renwick, who happens to be a colleague of ours. In fact, he is making sure that everything's working well technologically. So thank you for that, Matt. This is an ebook, and it's terrific, and you don't have to be a principal to benefit from it. And that ebook link will be included along with this conversation. And an article that's hot off the press by a colleague of mine that I admire tremendously, Dorsey Hammond, has just written an article called Phonics: Why the Seductive Appeal. Musings of a Veteran Reading Teacher. And he's much more than that. He's a scholar and a researcher, and um, wrote a wonderful book called The Comprehension Experience. And phonics is and word work is part of everything, but not isolated. And you wanted to say something more.
No, I'm going to build on that because I think that is critical that teachers have important articles and resources and other people to think along with because there's a old saying, I think it's an Aesop quote that says a man is known by the company he keeps. So along the way through our journey, I know your journey and definitely mine, that's how our paths cross because of recognizing that teachers are intellectuals and they're thinkers, and our children will thrive only when teachers are viewed that way. One of the people I've followed over time is a classic, is Gordon Wells, The Meaning Makers. I have a short quote that I'd like to read regarding that because it fits really well into what you were saying, Regi. He says, for too long, experts from outside the classroom have told teachers what to think and what to do. They have even designed programs and materials that are teacher-proof in an attempt to bypass teachers' professional expertise in the same way that so many teachers have bypassed the contributions that students can make to collaborative knowledge building. And so that dovetails together. What we think and believe about ourselves is also how we think about who our kids can become. What kind of citizens do we want, and how are they becoming literate? Because I don't want kids to feel small in this world. And if we don't uncork them, the fine wine, they will forever be kept bottled. There's no what's so important about this is when you were talking about going around and looking and observing, you're an assessor, you're constantly doing that with kids as readers and writers and noticing what they're doing. So you build those lessons. You can't predict how kids are going to respond. Even in a conversation, you can't predict what they're going to say. You can't predict what they're going to do as readers as they're trying to figure out words and as writers. But you can watch, you can observe, and then you can teach from that.
Oh, very, very important, which we haven't talked about a lot, but was a huge lesson for me, is the professional learning. That you have to be engaged in professional learning with other people. You really cannot just do it by yourself. And Kathy, we haven't really talked about that. You and I have confidentially. I've not said it publicly, but you have become my literacy hero, my soulmate in terms of literacy and learning. Somebody we talk, even in planning this, we didn't know exactly how this would turn out. We have busy lives. We want to be spontaneous, but we also are reading all the time and thinking professionally and learning professionally. And that was a huge lesson for me. I could go into a school and people would be very excited, even when I stayed for a whole week and they're on a high, and I'd come back and a few months later, nothing had changed. And they were it was kind of like the empty vessel, just fill me up. And there was no, and then I made a decision that I would not go back to a school unless they were engaged in high level, ongoing, embedded, weekly professional learning. And that was this big video-based program that I developed with Heinemann was for that reason. It was a tool for principals and teachers to say, here's how we do professional learning. Here's what it looks like and sounds like, because they didn't have a model. That was a big learning for me. It wasn't enough that I had just written books. Teachers needed to see, what does this look like? What does it look like to teach reading in kindergarten, in third grade? What does it look like to do a shared writing together and then have kids go off and write? And what kind of help do they need? So I modeled that and then held teachers' hands and gradually released responsibility the way we do for students. And that changed everything. Things that scholars really have.
Well, I just had a conversation recently with some professionals that I highly regard, and then I was introduced to someone new. I'm going to go back to that quote that I just read because it talks about collaborative knowledge building and teacher professional expertise. And the way you do that, you a district does not have the capacity to build everyone's professional expertise the way it needs to be. The reading, the collaboration. So sometimes the collaboration that I have is with a book, a professional book. But then I need to have conversations. So I would find another fearless colleague that wanted to also read. And I was talking about this recently in a conversation, and one of the people said to me, "But that takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of work. What happens if you don't have that kind of time?" And I said, "Well, the way I look at it is this. When you look at it through a child's eyes and a parent's eyes, what kind of classroom do you want your child to be in? And what kind of a classroom do children need to be in to thrive?" And the response was, "I never thought about it through the eyes of a child before."
Right.
And I think that's, for me,
That's huge.
grounding.
Mhm.
Looking at it constantly through the eyes of a child, because I need to make time and space for my professional learning, my professional growth, so I know that I can be my absolute best. And I have a quote from your book, Regi, that I really would like to share because it's perfect right now, and it comes at the end. And this is just perfect. You said, "Along my journey, I learned that teaching and coaching are what I'm good at and what I love doing. I am honored to be part of this profession, even as it is fraught with ongoing challenges. It's the what's possible with all learners that keeps me awe-inspired. Put me in the front of a group of children, and regardless of their grade, abilities, and quirkiness, I see their potential and promise. I fall in love with them and adore teaching them, learning from them, and learning with them. It's where I experience a state of flow. I don't see anything but those children, even when there are 20 or more visitors observing." And one more piece. I know I'm taking a little long on this. It says, "Here's a crucial lesson I learned over many decades. I have had many encouragers along the way, but some naysayers too. There will always be people telling you it can't be done, that it's too risky, too costly, too difficult. Ignore those voices. Listen to your inner voice. Start dreaming. It hasn't been done yet until you do it."
Oh my gosh, Kathy, that's what a gift. Thank you for that.
You're the gift. It's your words that,
No, I think for
yes,
both of us, teaching is not just, was never just a career or a job. It's a calling. Didn't start out that way for me, but and I feel like this is the most important work in the world, the work that we do. Um, we're just about out of time. And I want to end with a very short story. Uh,
and maybe before you do it, could I just recommend a song for people to get that courage?
yeah,
Music is a part of my life. I love music. And sometimes this work in our environments, as we talked about, can be hard. And sometimes finding those fearless allies might be difficult. And so, what keeps me going? I have a song that I play sometimes on my walk to keep, and it was popular. It's a pop music piece.
Can you sing it for us?
What? No. Oh, I wish I could, but everybody would click off right now if I did. It's called Unstoppable by Sia. It was about 2016, and it's that outside courage. If any of you need that outside courage, play this song. I'll just do a little few of the lines in the stanza. I'll put my armor on, show you how strong I am. I'll put my armor on, I'll show you that I am. I'm unstoppable. I'm a Porsche with no brakes. I'm invincible. Yeah, I win every single game. I'm so powerful. I don't need batteries to play. I'm so confident. Yeah, I'm unstoppable today.
Wow, sounds like a kindergarten student coming in. We we just have to not mess it up and get in the way. Um, well, I want to end then, Kathy. I want I'm going to end with just a very short story. Um, that I call, it doesn't have a name for it really, but it was a new first grade student that had come into the classroom, and we were doing a shared writing where this, as I mentioned earlier, the kids are giving their, I don't remember what the topic was, they're giving their input, and then I'm writing down what they're saying, and sometimes stretching out the sounds as we're going along. And this one child gave a comment that just didn't make any sense at all. But I had learned that we value everything that the kids say. I wasn't going to say, well, no, that doesn't make sense. And then you might have lost that kid for the whole year, right? So I always had a blank chart on the wall. And so I said, so I wrote down the child's words, even though they didn't make sense and they had nothing to do with what we were doing. And when I've done that, usually what happens is students feel, wow, she recognized what I said must be important because she wrote it down. And this student said, he had his hand up again and he said, would you put my name next to my words? And my heart just stopped, Kathy, when that happened, because what he was asking for and what he was recognizing was, what I call, I see you. I see you. I see you as a human being with potential. I celebrate you. And just having his words up on the wall, and then when I wrote his name underneath that, he was he was captivated. And then the kids saw also the respect that we want to show every learner, regardless of their age, right? Student or teacher. That was a pivotal moment for me because I still remember that. I remember what the child looked like. It didn't occur to me initially to put his name down, but putting his name down, then he owned the words. It made him feel seen. It made him feel seen and cared for.
That's a neat.
So, I mean, that's where I want to end. I know, Kathy, if you want to add anything to it, but one of the reasons that we did this series together is we're teaching in hard times. And we need to be looking out for each other and making the literacy teaching that we're doing as relevant and as joyful and as celebratory as possible. And I thank you for being my partner and my literacy soulmate. And also now, as we've gotten to know each other so well, a treasured friend. So thank you for all of that.
And
And
I am forever grateful for this opportunity because teaching is joyful.
yeah, it has been. All right. Well, thank you, Matt, for all your assistance and I wish everybody, and I know Kathy does the same, we need more celebration these days. So uncork the bottle. Uncork the bottle. Thank you.
Um,